Hello, greetings everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is Jim McKeith, and today you join us for everything you need to create iOS cross-platform apps with Serge Pilko and Ian Barker.
Hello.
Howdy.
Hello.
I'm going to put the link here for the blog post that has everything in it there in the chat, so you can grab those. And we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm excited. I'm not a huge iOS developer, but I know you two are, so I'm gonna learn a lot as well.
Yes, you can tell by the pain in her eyes how much iOS development we've done.
Hi again, and now we start with let's say our practical part. And Ian still here, and I'm still here, and now we start with more details. And I wanted to mention that we are talking about developing native applications for iOS, native cross-platform application. And native, it's a very important word and term here, because Delphi creates iOS applications without any abstraction or virtualization layer. It's fully native application for iOS platform. Am I correct? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the real strength of Delphi is that apart from a Mac, because that's an Apple restriction, really, they want everything to compile on a Mac. You don't need anything unusual whilst you're developing your app. You develop your app just as you develop a Windows app or an Android app. You have to use FireMonkey, FMX, but apart from that, design the screens as you would design any other screen. And off you go. Out comes an Apple app, and you're not writing a different set of instructions in your code. You're writing the same instructions, whether it's Windows or Android. There are some very minor differences, but essentially it's the same code. The code gets compiled down to native code, and that's the important thing. It's not interpreted like a Python app might be or something like that.
It's there actually, is not a web application, as
correct,
because
yes.
we have a lot of cross-platform frameworks. Most of them are web-based.
Yeah, and some of the progressive web apps have their place. There's some very good progressive web apps, some airline apps, for example, or PWAs. But for real performance and, more importantly, security, you want a native app, and that's what Delphi is producing.
Yeah, and yes, and Delphi produces also it's like single code base, because we have one. Actually, we have one code for Android, iOS. Of course, today we're talking about iOS, but also, of course, we have platform differences, and we can add conditional compilation directives, and also manage, let's say, how our code and perform all these differences for each platform. That's also very important.
Yeah, and the T platform component, for example, manages a lot of the differences. Like if you're trying to get a path, if you use the Delphi language properly, well, I don't know whether I should say properly, but if you understand it fully, then you can use things like tpath and so on and so forth to actually keep away some of the differences. Because as you know, on Mac and iOS, because they're Unix based, and also even if you were writing a Linux app with FMX Linux or something like that, the slashes go the other way. So Windows slashes one way, and all the iOS and Unix-based platforms go the other way. And so Delphi is very, very good at taking all that nonsense away. So you don't have to worry about that. You can say, trading path delimiter, and Delphi works out whether that should be a slash or a backslash. And these kind of things are very important, I think, for keeping us happy.
Yeah, and now let's start from prerequisites. Again, this our video is for the newbies and beginners who are new with iOS development with Delphi.
Yeah.
If you even have experience with developing native applications for iOS, I mean native using Xcode or Swift, of course, it will be helpful, because it will be like combination, like how to develop at all iOS application, and especially on Windows with Delphi.
Yeah, and there is, quite often people say, do I really need a Mac to develop Macintosh and iOS apps? And actually, yes, you do. There is no getting away from it. Whilst the Delphi is running on Windows, you must have an app, a Mac. And in fact, in my case, behind me, I have a Mac Mini that I'm using. It's probably the cheapest Apple device you can get. But there are some services which we may have already talked about, but Serge and I are doing this slightly time shifting thing where, this video is being recorded in advance. Is first of all, if you want to do iOS apps, you need a Mac, an Apple Mac. Okay.
Or
if you
a lot of cases, or at least which I saw, that when Delphi developer have a Mac as a main computer and they have a virtual machine with Windows, it also will work. It also will work, and on this case, you can do everything in one physical device.
Yeah, and that depends if they want to throw away several $1,000s on a expensive Apple device. But yes, yeah, I know. In fact, Jim McKeith is one guy I know who actually uses Apple hardware all the time, and runs VMs. I think that's how he does it. I think he's got a Windows PC as well. Personally, I prefer Windows PCs, and my main development is a Windows box. So you need an Apple device.
And we have can give you an advice: Apple device not too cheap. You should have SSD hard drive, because if you will buy just for test and for the games like HDD, you will spoil all your mood. It will be crazy. It will be so
yeah, well, in fact, a little behind the scenes thing, you and I have just been spending about 20 minutes struggling getting my Mac to do things, and it took longer than it needed to, because that Mac is very old and very slow, but it still works. A new Mac is a bit of an investment, but if you're serious about writing OS apps, there's no way around it. The second prerequisite that you need is to have PA Server installed. Now, what PA Server is a specialized Delphi server app that runs on the Macintosh. And what that does is it sits on the Apple Mac and receives instructions from your Delphi RAD Studio application. And what those instructions are they're telling the Mac to do some compiling for it and code signing.
It's a bridge because between Windows and Delphi and native macOS operating system.
Yeah, and as I understand it, it's actually a customized version of RAD Server. So it's like a nice little demonstration of how RAD Server works. But it's just the bridge. It's just telling Xcode to do some compilation. Now, the part of Xcode that it's actually getting to do that compilation are called the Xcode command line tools. Okay, and the command line tools, we'll have some slides to talk a little bit more about how to get those, but you have to have those installed. They're not normally installed, but they're fairly easy to install. You just go to a link in Xcode and download them. And what they do is they allow the PA server to run command lines that you will see when we compile the app in a moment. They run command lines that will compile your Delphi code and convert it into the final native app. And the last thing you need is, and this is yet again some more money going out to Apple, as if they didn't have enough, being the richest company in the world, you need to have an Apple developer account. Now, again, we will have some slides talking about this, I'm sure, but you go to developer.apple.com and go on there and you pay them some money. It is not free. It is
annually.
It's what, sorry?
It will be also annually, guys. It's not only once payment.
Yes, yeah, each year, annually, yes, and that's the Apple tax. Now, if you are going to do enterprise apps, which is there's another video that I've done before about Apple enterprise apps. Apple enterprise apps are for a big organization where they want applications that do not go through the App Store or are not directly installed on devices like a developer could install them. As a developer, you can install on up to 100 devices, I think, maybe even more now. without any further ado, or you can release them through Apple's App Store with an enterprise account, which costs more money. The current price in US dollars is $250 a year. It's just like a normal developer account, except it allows you to directly install apps onto your employees' devices, and you don't go through the App Store, and you can actually install them from a web page. In fact, that's how my customers do it. They have a special web page. They click on a link, it downloads the app onto their iPhone or their iPad or their Mac directly from the web page. But that's not the account you normally use. Normally, you have a normal Apple developer account. That gives you access to Xcode. That gives you access to being able to create certificates and something called provisioning profiles. Those provisioning profiles are just a complicated set of certificates, I suppose, that say that, first of all, this app is written by you, the developer, and secondly, that app is a genuine app that has been code signed by you. So it's not some copy or knockoff of your app. You are the one that created it. It was code signed by you using a certificate that only you've got access to, or people.
Nobody else except of you will be able to provide updates of your application.
Yes.
If somebody else will just will try to take your application name, he won't be able to upload it to Apple Store at all.
Correct. Yes, and it also means if there is a rogue app that does something terrible, then Apple can trace it back and find out who you are. So those are the things. So you need a Mac. You need to have PA server installed on that Mac, and you need the Xcode command line tools. And you get the Xcode command line tools as long as you've got an Apple developer account.
Yeah, but you also need a Red Studio with
yes.
iOS and Android and cross-platform application development at all.
Yes,
to change your license. Yeah.
Correct. And the RAD Studio does require certain versions of RAD Studio to work. I think the Community Edition does allow you to do iOS apps. I'm not sure, but there are some restrictions, and in fact, you can always download a trial version of RAD Studio if you're not sure that it's for you, and see what it can do for you. So,
and of course, you need an iOS device.
Yeah, an iPhone. Well, technically, you don't. I mean, in theory,
but very important addition that if you want to start the development, you should have your iPhone device. You should have install correct version of your Xcode for this device, and your Xcode and command, and your Mac OS or OS version should support this device. This Xcode and all this change should be up to date.
Yeah, and in fact, this is the second time you and I have tried to get together to record this video, and most of the time it's Apple getting in the way, stopping us being able to do it. But what actually happened last time was it just happened to be at the time of the Apple Developer Conference, and they released new versions of everything. And what happened was my phone updated, and then I had to update my Mac operating system and all the other things. And so these are the kind of problems you're going to get. If you start to develop iOS apps, it is actually quite easy, but just be aware that you're doing a deal with Apple here effectively, and that means that they call the shots, and you will need to make sure that you keep up to date with the latest versions of everything in order to write the apps. So let's move on to this slide then. So the next thing to do is, if you're developing native iOS apps with Delphi, how do you create an iOS app with Delphi? Well, first of all,
let's just verbally go through these items, and then we show you how it
show
works.
My screen. Yes.
Screen.
Yeah. So the first thing is adding the SDK support and adding a connection, which we'll show in a moment. And the connection is just from your RAD Studio Delphi IDE or C++ builder, and connects to your Mac. And then it speaks to your Mac using PA server and pulls over the SDK, which is the the language support and the operating system support that Delphi needs in order to be able to do anything. And once you've got that done, you can create a FireMonkey FMX app. It will only be a FireMonkey app. So if you've written VCL apps in the past, in order to do iOS or any cross-platform, you actually need to learn a little bit about FireMonkey. It's not that difficult. It is very similar to VCL, but there are some subtle differences, like labels have .text instead of .caption and things like that. But create a FireMonkey FMX app as a cross-platform project. Go ahead and develop your application and do whatever you want. And then and I'd say that's probably a little bit, the bullet points here are slightly out of step. Add the iOS target. I would probably do that to start off with, and then develop your application, just because it makes it easier to preview the screens. Set up the application settings for iOS support. There is a thing called a provisioning profile, which we'll have some slides on. If we've not already shown it at this stage.
Before the step, you have to learn and Apple documentation how to work with the certificate, provisioning profiles at all, because it's against a little bit different world.
Yeah.
It was invented by Apple. And yes, you have to perform a lot of steps. And of course, you should have, on this stage, you should have your developer account, because everything you will create online on developer.apple.com.
Correct. Yeah. And developer.apple.com is where these provisioning profiles and settings are set. And then really, you just compile and run the application like you would normally. The only difference is that instead of running on your Windows PC, it will go and send the commands from RAD Studio Delphi over to the Macintosh, the Apple Mac, and it will run the compilation, the final compilation commands on their Mac. And then the Mac will talk to your iPhone or your iPad device, and it will put the application on your iPhone or iPad and run it. And then PA server and Xcode act as the bridge. So when you debug, the debugging is actually happening on the Mac, but the results of the debugging is coming back through to your RAD Studio. So can you set breakpoints? Yes. Can you see other forms of debugging like examine variables and things like that? Yes. Is it easy? No. Does it sometimes not work? Yes. Let's be honest. Apple's technology is a little bit fiddly sometimes, and sometimes it can be a problem. If your app crashes, you can go into the logs on your Xcode on your Mac. You can look up your device, your phone or iPad, click on that and go to the logs, and you can select the debug logs. In fact, we just did that a little while ago to work out why something wasn't working. So you do get quite complete debugging. You can also deploy your apps to a simulator. And all the simulator is like a virtual device. So instead of having a physical iPhone, and I really strongly suggest that you do have an iPhone or an iPad, a real one, you can actually run your apps inside a simulator, which is Apple's word for a virtual device, a bit like Android has AVDs. And what this does then is runs your app. Now, the problem with the Apple simulators are they're a little bit limited, and some of the functions that you would expect to work don't work. I think the camera, for example, will just come up and say that feature is not available and stuff like that. But personally, whenever I do any debugging and testing, I actually do it with a physical device. In the US, if you're looking to buy a device, a recent second-hand, used iPhone is reasonably easy to obtain. I actually bought an iPhone SE, which is the cheapest iPhone device. I normally use an Android device as my main phone, a Samsung phone, but it cost me like $5 a month or something. So it was actually very cheap. But you can't have too old a device because Apple gradually make these devices obsolete. So if you go back to too old an iPhone, you won't be able to install the latest SDKs. And if you can't do that, then you can't guarantee your app's going to work. I would say get a reasonably recent device. So here's the steps that are on Serge's slide here, which is maybe you want to talk about it, Serge.
Yes, that's almost what.
Otherwise, it's all me. It's not the Ian show.
Almost explained this part. All these blocks are just like applications, application lifecycle. Yes, we compile our we can have our object Pascal or C++ source code, which we compiles inside Delphi, and then we send it. We connect to this our bridge application per server, which were installed on Mac. Yes, you can download it from Embarcadero or during installation of Red Studio. I guess you will have this per server in PA server folder on your computer, in your program files folder. You copy this PKG file and move it to iOS. Then you just, or not iOS, to macOS. Then in Finder, just double click it, install it, and unpackage it, and start it. And after that, you will get like constant application where you have to provide your macOS password for starting it, and that's all. After that, you can start working. Of course, before any compilations, you have to start this PA server on your Mac machine. Delphi compiles your applications, connects to this PA server, and start to send to it and perform a lot of actions. That's not just like sending some binary. It's all like signing, deploying, packaging, all these actions Delphi performs together with PA server applications, because per server just again get something from Delphi, perform applications on native macOS platform, go back and package. In the end, we have packaged IPA application for iOS, for instance, for iOS, because of course we can develop macOS applications also for Apple, important. Sorry, Ian. The last thing I wanted to mention that PA server works with Xcode command line tools. It's command line tools at a package which you also should download from Apple's servers. Your Xcode command line tools should support your device. They have like for each iOS version, they have separated Xcode command line tools package. You should together install them with your Xcode, and after that you will have IPA application in your PA server folder on macOS, and then you can upload it to Apple's store. But of course, PA server will start your applications on your device also.
Yeah, and that's the thing that when you compile a Windows program, most developers who are watching this will probably understand that you will end up with whatever your application is called, so my project.exe. So you're normally producing something that you would give to people to run with a .exe on the end. In this case, with Apple, you're creating something called my project.ipa, and the IPA is the equivalent of a .exe, except it's a little bit more complicated than that. But that is the thing that you give to Apple and say, here we go, here's my app. It's going to take some practice for you before
that's
you get
not
to
an
stage.
executable. Yes, you cannot put it in some folder and start it.
It's actually closer to a zip file, actually. Effectively, it's a form of archive. But anyway, that's what you get. So the next part for the App Store, I'll talk about for a second. So for App Store apps, you must go through Apple's process. There's no way of going around it. If you are going to create apps that are enterprise apps, then you do not need to do this step. There is no approval by Apple for enterprise apps. And an enterprise app is just like a regular Apple Store app, except first of all, you need that developer enterprise account, which costs more money. And secondly, your customer needs to have paid for that, and you need to be, it's a bit of a complicated process that I've done a video before, but that's the only exception. Anything else, where it's an app that you want to sell or even give away for free and have installed on normal iPhone devices that are not under your control directly, you need to go through the iOS app approval process. You can do what's known as ad hoc apps, but there's a limit on how many of those can be deployed, and it's like 100 a year or something like that, and you can only change yearly. So you get 100 per year to deploy, and that number may have changed. I don't normally do those. So in order to provision your app for the store, you need to go to your developer account, create these provisioning profiles that we talked about earlier, and certificates. Use a thing called iTunes Connect, which is their portal for uploading it. It takes you through a set of steps that says, give me the .ipa package, describe what it can do. Here's
approve. Yeah, no, it's the same process.
Yeah,
like for
here's
Android.
10,000 screenshots you need to produce and things like that. They've got some very, very stringent requirements for things that you need your app to have. So whenever you go to an app store listing, you'll see some images across the top and you see some text. That's all included as part of that process. And once you've done that and you hit the approve button, the submit button, it goes off to Apple, and sometimes days later and sometimes weeks later, depending on how long they take to test it, they will go through your app and they'll either come back and say, it's failed, and here are the reasons why it's failed. You've got a missing required image, or there's a provision, you're accessing the contacts, but you don't ask for permission properly, or you're using a forbidden SDK, because they do look for...
Even if you have Android login, but do not have Apple login, they will ask you why. Please add Apple login also. Why?
Yeah, and many other rules as well, like... if you refer, this has changed recently, but if you refer someone to a page where they pay a subscription for you from within the app, so if it says you can sign up now, and they click on a button that goes and signs up on a website somewhere and then activates the app, that's an absolute no-no. You can do that, but you also need to have a button that allows people to sign up for subscriptions within the Apple ecosystem. So they're trying to make sure that they don't lose out on their money. So there are very, very stringent requirements. If you look out on Twitter or social media in general, the number one thing you'll see is people complaining, developers complaining about their app being rejected, and they're always like, I can't believe it, they said I used the wrong font, and stuff like that. But that is unfortunately, that's the game you're playing here. You're playing with Apple, and that's their rules. There is a thing called Test Flight, which is an application. It used to be written by someone else, and Apple bought them out. And what that allows you to do is have a number of people that are effectively beta testers of your app. You can they sign up to Test Flight for your app, and they will receive pre-release versions of your app to test it before it goes live. Test Flight's pretty good. It gives you a lot of feedback on crashes and things like that. So if you do roll it out to, say, 500 people or something like that, and your app suddenly has got a big problem, you suddenly realize that people in France can't use it, or Denmark or somewhere random like that. It's very useful.
Sometimes
but once
it's the easiest way to share your application with someone else, even within your team, because as we said, you cannot send some binary and they won't be able to install it. The only test flight process is only the way they can use for tests.
Yeah, correct. And that's the main purpose of Test Flight is really, as it says, test is in the name. So, but it's very useful. If you've not read about Test Flight before, we'll make sure there's some links in the slides that accompany this, where you can go to it. And then the final step is the big step, of course, publishing your app. Once that happens, your app goes into the App Store, and it's very quick. Once you're approved, it appears, relatively fast, and that's when all hell breaks loose, because the rest of the world can now see your app. And if it's one that you're making money from and selling, then you'll start to receive income from that app. Apple take their cut off of it, which I think is 30%, unless you've earned. I think there's a step. I actually don't know, because I normally only do enterprise apps, but there is a cut that Apple take from every sale. But what you will get is a check or money in the bank once your app sells. Now, once your app is published on the App Store, particularly if you publish it worldwide, if it's successful, you will get tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of downloads if you're successful. However, there are thousands and thousands, in fact, millions of apps in the App Store. So unless your idea is extremely unique, or you get featured on some kind of page that promotes it by Apple in particular, your income may go at a small ramp up rate. It's a little flight as it goes up on a slow curve. But good luck to you. I hope if you
that's about the marketing and sales. It's another universe, let's say.
Yeah, it's like anything. Now the thing is, I did do a spreadsheet once of profitability of apps. Because the problem that you have when you actually start writing iPhone apps is, I want to make money. I'm going to get rich by writing an iPhone app. Okay, that's fine. But one thing you need to understand is, if that is your primary source of income and how you're going to earn your money, if you work out how much your monthly outgoings are for your rent or your mortgage and your food and staff, if you have staff, and petrol or gas, and then divide that down by $1.99, or 99 cents, or $4.99. And these are kind of typical price levels for apps. You've got to sell a lot of apps to make your money. So
nowadays it's all about the subscriptions, let's say.
Correct. And that is the key thing there is, generally speaking, your app is either free or freemium. In other words, it does something so cool that people get the app for free and then sign up for additional services. But if it's an app that the companies, say a website or a bigger desktop app, like an accounts app or something like that, and this app is like a time attendance thing or something like that, then that's probably the way to earn money. But if you're expecting to get rich quick with an app, unless you've got a very, very unique idea, you're going to starve. I think
it's a little bit. We went somewhere in other directions. Let's
go exactly. So anyway, so the point is, publishing your app is very, very easy, but the hard part is fulfilling the obligations of Apple. So developing an iOS apps with Delphi. Weirdly enough, this actually features a video from me, which is always the way, because I get everywhere now. There's a thing called the FireMonkey app low-code wizard. You can get that from Get It, and it will compile apps for the iOS platform, and it'll also do Android and Windows as well. If you go onto the low-code wizard video that you see here, you'll see me explain how it works. It's a bit weird, and what it does is creates a nice app that's a model view controller app with some tests and stuff like that. It's a very quick way of getting a jump start to producing applications. It takes a little bit of getting used to, because there's quite a lot of extra engineering gone into that app, excuse me, but actually, it can really get you onto a head start to designing some apps that have got some good functionality.
Okay, now let's back to the practical part, where Ian and I will try to comment also, or all this what we mentioned before in practical thing, and Ian will show us his phone with
we'll actually take some screenshots of the phone to include in the video as well, because phones don't show up very well on cameras a lot of the time, but we'll do what we can. Air Parrot, I think, where you can actually mirror your iPhone to the screen. So I'll see if I can get that included, and we'll maybe combine that in the video. So here we have a simple app that you can see on my screen. I literally went to new, other, and then selected a blank multi-device application. In fact, I think I went to multi-device application, said select a blank multi-device application. I put a couple of things on.
Before adding any controls, let's show that we have iOS SDK added to our platform.
Yes. So what happens is, first of all, in the background, let me pull up my Mac, which is over here. I'm just going to minimize some things that we don't want to see. So
by default here, Delphi added Android, iOS, and macOS platforms, but we will start only for iOS.
Yes, correct. So what I have over here, and I'm going to drag this over so we can see, in the background, I have my Mac. This is my Macintosh. It's sitting behind me, and it is running PA Server. And in fact, just up here is the PA Server manager. But it's running PA Server, so this has to run all the time. Okay, and I can connect to that by doing this. I'll make sure those go away later. But that tells me that I can connect to my local network for the Mac. In here, where it says edit connection, okay, I have my Mac set up, and there's the IP address that I just showed you in the Mac. The port number is always 64211. You can change it if you want to, but the default is that. And then the password is the password that I use to connect to my Mac. If I click on this button, it will say, yes, it worked. So I know now that my connection between my Mac and my PC is working. I got to that point by clicking on add and selected the iOS Mac connection from the drop-down list, and set up my system like that. That produces that connection. Now, the next thing that I would need to do is go into there and say edit SDK. Exactly the same thing. I clicked on add. I chose iPhone, and it will automatically tell me which SDK my Xcode on my Mac knows about. These are quite important. Once I do that, I click on update local file cache. And what it does is it talks to the Macintosh, and it brings over the header files that are needed for the RAD Studio compiler to understand the functions and features of the SDK in order to do its work. So you can see a lot of little bits and bobs in there. And I actually have some custom ones in here, like these ones, for example. These I have some TMS components that actually use some custom libraries. So if you have a library that is not one of the standard libraries, there's some new AI libraries that were just released. You can add them in here. It pulls over those headers, and then you can write your programs to.
Oh, yes, I want to add. Sorry, Jan. That let's say that RAD Studio doesn't cover all iOS framework. Of course, it's not impossible, because you can add something on the fly, and you can take native iOS library, create let's say bridge file where you will map this iOS library.o file with your Delphi Object Pascal explanation of this let's say entry points for this library.
Yes.
Like describe type, describe some structures, and describe procedures and functions.
Yes. So the .o is a static library which it links in, and the headers are the descriptions of the entry points and the parameters and function names and whether they're functions or procedures or whatever. So yes, and that's
the next
what this
step, next stage of development.
Yeah. So you click on update local file cache and do that. At that point, I now would have an app. Now, I already said when I wrote this this little test here, I already added in fact, I deleted the test project. What am I doing? yeah, I can add a platform here and say, okay, I would like to add Android or something like that. There isn't any to add because I've actually got all the available ones added. So there you go. I can't actually do that. But if it didn't already show iOS in here, I'd click on target and then click add platform and then add in the iOS and it will work. Now, what we did was we had a blank form and it doesn't really show a lot because actually my iPhone is set to dark mode. So what I got was when I ran the application, I just had a black screen, which wasn't very useful. But what I've done is I've put a T label control on there and a button. Now, not all controls will work on iOS. There are some specialized ones, that, as you may have come across before, that don't work with FireMonkey. So if I click on standard, you'll see here that T main menu and T pop-up menu are grayed out. The reason is if I point to them, you can see where it says supported platforms. It tells you which platforms support those controls. So there are some controls that iOS, for example, doesn't support. There is no idea of a pop-up menu in iOS. But most of them are available, and you can see which ones they are by being grayed out or not. But we just went to the palette, selected a button and dropped a button on, and selected a label control. Behind the button, just like any other Delphi program, is the following. In fact, let's get rid of that because I don't need that. I've got an event, which is when you click on the button, I set the text of the label, and that is up here. The text of the label, because it's an FMX app, not a VCL app. I set the text, which is currently saying label 1, to hello, and that's it. That I am not writing any weird code just because it's iOS. I'm writing normal Delphi. Now, the next bit is, what do we do to get it on our device? Well, if I click on here and say run, okay, what will happen is, hopefully,
here we have skipped a huge part about all the certification and provisioning, but maybe we'll.
Oh yes, yeah, I forgot about that.
Later,
yeah,
because you won't be able, guys, to start the application without a lot of pre-work from Apple, because you have to, if you want to start any application, you have to prepare provisioning profile for your exact device, which you will use for the tests. And you have to set up your Xcode. You have to download Xcode and install it. After that, you have to log into your Xcode, upload certificates from your Apple's developer's account on the portal, create provisioning profile, attach your iPhone unique UUID number, and after all this magic work, you will be able to start your application.
Okay, so one thing we should look at is that in the background, the project options screen, before you can do anything, you need to go to this thing here that says deployment provisioning, okay? And you need to have already set up, as we said earlier on, provisioning profiles and a developer certificate. If you don't have those, it doesn't matter what you do with your app, it will not run on your iPhone device. You'll have a problem. And
yeah, because of all the security reasons, because nobody can install something without any permissions on your iPhone.
Yeah, the thing I like about the iPhone platform is it is actually fairly secure. I don't feel like we're likely to get viruses, which is not true of Windows and definitely not true of Android either. But the certification is a pain for developers, but it's a really good thing for users. Anyway, so as you can see, this is under my name, app identifier. This is just a part of the system on there. You can also go to version info, and there's some information in here that you will need when you talk to Apple's developer account and set some information up. You'll need that in there. So what we're going to do, we're going to make sure that we've got development set up as the target. the configuration. The device that I'm going to make it run on is my iPhone SE, and the build configuration, I'm actually going to run it as a release configuration for now because I don't want to get the debugging going. There's just this Delphi code that's actually going to operate when we click on the button. So if I run my app like this, what you'll see it do is it's now talking to PA server. Actually, it's linking remote locally. It's now talking to the PA server, and deploying means that it's taking information from our PC over to the Macintosh. It combines everything together. There's a lot of images for the icons and stuff like that that you'll need, and that will be one of the major time wasters for you, is producing a lot of different sizes of icons for the different size iPhone and iPad screens. Once it's finished deploying all of that, it builds it into this .ipa package that we spoke about earlier on, and it then code signs it, and it will mark it with your special developer certificate and all the rest of it. And at the end of it, you can probably just about see at the very bottom of the screen, it says success. And what that means is that on my device, I'm just going to unplug this now because I think it's safe to do. We're just going to try and I'm going to close my curtains to hopefully see this for a moment. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second so that we can see my camera. And what we should see, it's just about.
I can see a cat with two strange eyes.
Yeah, it's, hang on. Yeah, that's my wife's background. But you can just about see in the back there, there's the Delphi application icon. And if I click on that, the application will run. And I will do a proper screenshot of this. But if I click on the button, it changes the text to say hello. That's not showing up at all, but we'll get that. We'll get that later and show you some slides, everybody, to prove that it's working. I'll get my little thing working, but that is it. That's all it needs to do to get that Delphi application running on iOS. We spent a lot of time talking about the requirements for getting ready, but once you've got it ready, you just write a Delphi application. It's as simple as that. And the Delphi application that you write is a FireMonkey application. But apart from that, there's nothing special that you need to do. I'll go back to sharing my screen again. So just to recap, if you wanted to, you can go in and say file new other, go down to there and run the FireMonkey app code wizard. If you don't want to do that, if you want to do it your own way, then you can say like this, you can go file new and then multi-device application and Delphi. And then this gives you a whole selection of templates or frameworks that are all ready to go with some information on. You can then build on top of that and use your normal Delphi controls, write your application. Once you've done that, you make sure that you, as we talked about before, you add the platform for iOS. You probably do that to start off with. Once you've done that, you select the iOS thing and select Edit SDK. You have a connection set up, which is also in the same place. The connection set up to PA server, which is sitting on your Mac. You make sure that works. As long as you get this button saying, yes, it succeeded, then the PA server on your Mac is successfully talking to your Windows computer. You add the for the SDK, so you choose the right version of the SDK. There are different versions, and then you choose whether you want to be development or application store or ad hoc. Most of the time, you're going to be development. When you're ready to do App Store deployment, then you select App Store. The only other things that you'll come across are to do with the project options, which we'll just pull this up in a second here. All the usual things you're familiar with as a Windows developer using VCL. You need to go to the version info, excuse me, and there are some things like bundle names and stuff like that that you need to have set up properly for Apple. and as we said before, the provisioning profiles, these have got to be right as well. As long as you do those, everything else is just writing a Delphi program. So getting to the point where you can actually provision things and compile them is a bit of a long step. But once you've done it, you're just writing a Delphi program. And that same multi-device application can work on my Android device like this, can work on a Mac, a Linux, and Windows using the same code. The way that you change what the view looks like, because obviously a big Windows desktop device doesn't look like an iOS device, is you can select which platform here. And then if you want to, my phone, for example, is an iPhone SE. I can go like that, and it would give a preview of the device so that I can see what it's going to look like. There is a multi-device preview, but I actually normally turn those off. But you can customize where you want the label. So you might say, oh, for the iPhone SE, I want it to look like this rather than the Windows version. But for Android, I'm going to have a 10-inch tablet, for example, and that looks silly like that. So I'm going to put the button down there, and I put that across there. And that's it. That's all you're doing there from XApp. Now, when you deploy your application to an iPad, you can also say, well, actually, I want a different view for iPads that's not the same as the iPhone view. Move the things around, do that. And if I want to, I can change the device orientation as well. So that if they've got an iPad, they turn it on its side, you know where your labels and your controls and your list boxes and all the other devices are. The same with your iPhone.
Yeah, but it's a little bit different question, because it's all about responsive design. You have to use appropriate components, which will allow you to orient your controls with different orientation and so on.
Correct. Yeah, flow layouts and things like that are very useful. And you have to rethink some of the things you do with navigation for phone devices and iPads. Because it's not the same as a Windows PC where
there is no model Windows, at least.
Yeah, no model Windows, and also the other thing as well is dialog boxes and pop-ups are not really normal. You can do message boxes and stuff like that, saying, hey, you typed your password in wrong or something like that. But generally speaking, the visual paradigm is that there's a navigation bar, and that's what the low-code app wizard does. It puts all that logic in for you so you don't have to think it through yourself. It does it. And watch the low-code video, because I do explain that on there. But that's it. It's difficult to get started, only because there's a lot of steps and you have to complete all of them in the right order for it to work. But once it's done, you're just writing a Delphi program. The only difference is, instead of saying Windows down on the right there, you're actually saying iOS device. As long as you Mac set up and you've got all your provisioning certificate up to date, it's dead easy. It really is quite simple to do. And that's the thing, that I don't know any other platform apart from Delphi that is quite as straightforward as this to target multiple devices. I know I can have that app there. I could spend another few hours adding some extra controls and logic in here. And that same app, I guarantee, I know that I would be able to write a macOS, Android, iPhone, iPad, Windows app with the same code, with a few little differences, and it would work and it would look great on all of them. There's very few other systems out there that even come close, and that's the strength of Delphi.
I can confirm.
Okay, so I think that's kind of concludes our demonstration. We'll pad this out with some slides as well, and some links at the end of it.
And I'd like to mention that for all these prerequisites and preparation steps, you can use Apple's documentations, because this documentation will be valid for our Delphi and Red Studio development also. It's all the same. If you, Ian already showed to us project settings page, and all the settings just like were mapped to Apple settings. They even have the same names. It's just.
Yeah, and most of the complicated bits are due to Apple's requirements, and they've got a lot of them. That's the only thing. And as long as you're not doing, you follow their rules and don't think you're going to get clever and avoid some of the requirements, life should be okay. But it's just the same with Google Play Store and things like that. They have requirements as well, and you have to adhere to them. And if you don't, then life gets difficult. But actually, writing the apps in the first place is straightforward. You just write a Delphi program. It just happens that it's going to run on an iPhone device or Android tablet or something. So. Okay, so we're going to go to the Q&A now. Is that right, Serge?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll now time travel into the future and answer everybody's questions live. Thanks for watching us.
Yeah. See you.
We are back live now. And here's Serge. Hi, Serge.
Hi, Ian. Hello, everyone. One more time.
Yeah, sorry to the people that said, oh, Ian, your screen resolution was way too high and your font wasn't big enough. Yes, that's entirely my fault. I apologize for that. If you go to the blog post, which I have put in a few links that have come up, I've actually taken some screenshots that are closer, a lower resolution, so you can actually see what's going on a bit more clearly. So Serge, a lot of questions. I'm not sure.
But yes, I've answered on also a lot of them, but of course, some questions are for Embarcadero, I guess. It's like about support and will be ready for iOS 16 and so on.
Yeah, so let's go through a couple of the questions just to answer some of the things that we said. A lot of people saying thanks very much, and it was a good demo. I strongly recommend that you go to the accompanying blog post, because there are links on there that go into a lot more detail, and there's also some screenshots of the app and some links to the basics of setting things up. We didn't show us installing PA Server, for example, on the Mac, just because it was already an hour, and we figured that if we kept going, we would be here for about 5 hours. And Serge and I have a life and actually have to go and do other things as well. So if we just look at some of the questions, a couple of people asked things like, oh, is there a Mac version of RAD Studio? And another person said, is there a Linux version? The answer is no, it is Windows, and that's actually kind of the point of what we're making in this webinar, that RAD Studio itself runs on Windows, and actually you only really need the Mac to build the apps. It's not like you sit on a Macintosh and design all the screens and write all the program logic. You just write a Delphi program the same as you do for Windows, except that the target that you're targeting is iOS. And if any of you have done Android before, then it's exactly the same process as Android. You can also do Linux. There is a blog post coming out this week on the Embarcadero blog about targeting Linux as well, with some examples of producing Delphi apps that will run on Linux, and I mean graphical apps. It's the same principle. PA Server is the app that sits on your Mac or you're on your Linux machine, or indeed on most other targets like a 64-bit Windows and things like that. And what that does in the case of iOS apps is it talks to the Mac and the Mac's Xcode. Xcode is Apple's own development environment for Swift and similar languages. Sorry, I didn't catch that.
And Objective-C.
And Objective-C, yes, yeah, of course. And what PA Server does is sends commands down to the Xcode command line tools and compiles your app. This is an Apple restriction. There is nothing that Embarcadero could do about this. This is how Apple make things work, that it must be compiled on a Mac. However,
not only because of Xcode, because Apple have very strict sign-in process with the certification, and you cannot do that outside the Mac because you're installing all the certificates to your machine, and it can be available only on Mac.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, one thing that I didn't make entirely clear on the the video is that whilst we keep saying a Mac, it doesn't actually have to be a genuine Mac device in the sense of a physical Macintosh. Behind me, in fact, if you can see on my here, there, I think I'm pointing to it now. That is my Mac there. That is a Mac, an iMac. It's pretty old. I mean, it's like a 4 or 5 year old Mac that I have, but you do not have to have a physical device. You can use a genuine licensed Mac virtual machine that's running in the cloud. Mac in Cloud are one company that provide that, and actually Mac in Cloud even have PA server installed on there quite often. It's one of the things they do. They realize that this is an opening, and I think there was a partnership at one point with Embarcadero, but you could use a Mac in Cloud instance. Their prices are you know, reasonably affordable, shall we say, for a month. They do plans where it's a monthly fee or pay by the hour, and then you don't really have to have a Mac at all. That might work out cheaper for you. I don't know. We have no link directly with them, but Mac in Cloud are the people. There's a few others out there that do it. So do you need a Mac? Yes, for the code signing. The other thing we didn't talk about was actually setting up what's known as the provisioning profiles, and these are a real pain in the neck, is the polite way of putting it, that you have to have the provisioning profiles. They are a kind of code signing certificate and a developer identity, shall we say. And what these say is that this developer who has created this app is known to Apple, and that the apps that they are creating are currently signed by a special cryptographic certificate so that Apple can trace back who the developer is. If you suddenly turn out to be some kind of spy from the Martian home planet or something like that, and you're stealing everybody's money, then they can withdraw and cancel your certificates, and your apps will stop working. But also, if you don't pay your yearly fees to Apple, your provisioning profiles and code signing certificates will stop working once that because they have a validity for a year, and your apps will stop working as well that way. So that was the key step. The blog does explain a bit more and has a link to that, developer.apple.com. So provisioning profiles and app IDs, they're quite important for the app. But once you've got PA server set up and that link to the Mac, whether it's a real Mac or a VM, virtual machine Mac running in the cloud, if you're just writing Delphi programs, it's really not that difficult. It's a different screen size because, you know, it's either a phone or it's an iPad, but really writing the program is just writing a normal FireMonkey app. So it's not terribly difficult at all. Questions. Serge, did you spot any particular questions that you wanted to pick up on?
No, I think here we have a couple of technical questions. Like the question is, can we use TWIP like a web browser component in FireMonkey application? If I got it correctly, we can use a FMX form, put a web browser component on it, and after that we can load to this web browser component any pages which we can download by locally. We can even store it locally, or we can use it from the web.
Yeah, and in fact,
it will be based on Chromium engine.
Yeah, one of my enterprise apps actually downloads some stuff from a corporate server. The enterprise apps don't go through the App Store. They are kind of private to a company. So in this case, it's a bunch of nurses, visiting nurses of America. Hello, if any of them are watching. And what they have is these people go and look after. My phone is making noises. They look after people who are sick in bed, and they used to use a camera to take pictures of injuries. I know this sounds bad, but they have to track, you know, the course of, say you've had an amputation. There's a lot of nursing to go on about that. And what this enterprise app does is replaces that camera and allows them to take pictures with their iPhone and it's stored securely. I encrypt all the data, and then the data is sent up back to the server and encrypted like that. This meant that I had to make it so that the photographs would not go into the normal photos section of the iPhone, because what they didn't want was taking someone's private, images of an amputated leg or something, an injury or something like that, and then accidentally uploading them to Facebook. As you can imagine, that would be a gross invasion of privacy. So what that app does is uses in the background indie components and some encryption. So you can, and it stores it in a particular place on the iPhone and encrypts that using standard Delphi encryption code. So it's all that kind of thing is possible. Someone was saying that the T web browser only provides IE compatibility. It does not provide T Edge browser functionality. Yeah, actually, that's a good point.
Well, in the Get It, we have Edge browser component.
Yeah,
it's just a library. It's just the library which we can add to the IDE, and after that we can use this component.
Yeah.
Yeah, the new version of the T web browser does have if you set it up right, which is to cover the doc wiki, you can have it use Edge browser as well, which is Chromium based.
Does it not use WebKit? I thought there was. I sort of saw somewhere some.
On iOS, on iOS it would use WebKit. Exactly.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, yeah. So actually, if I remember correctly, when you create it and use it to load the pages, and then depending on what target you're going to, the back end is different. But I could be wrong. I haven't used that. I actually use some different components for that kind of stuff. So yeah. So that was that. There are lots and lots of other questions. How are we doing for time? Okay, well, we're not doing too bad. Some people asking about C++ Builder and saying, did the stuff that we showed today work for C++ Builder? Absolutely. I didn't actually show anything that was Delphi specific, apart from one line of code that just set a caption on a FireMonkey label, and I only did that just for the sake of having some code that would compile. But no, everything that you saw today will work on C++ Builder. There's no difference in terms of how you provision things and stuff like that. So that's good. Lots of people saying hello from France and Chile and Brazil and pretty much, and Colombia, pretty much every country. Where is the iPhone connected, the Mac or the PC? Yeah, Serge, you answered this. I'll let you answer the question. So where is the iPhone connected?
Sure, something like for Android, you just connect to your machine, and you will have your phone in the drop down on the top of the of IDE. The same thing like for Android.
Yeah, and in fact, my phone I'm holding up here, that cable is plugged into the USB port on my Mac just here. And then when I go and select devices in the RAD Studio IDE, it knows about that device because the PA server asks Xcode what devices have you got attached, and then I can target my phone specifically. It's very slick. I have to say, when I first started doing iOS development and with RAD Studio, it was back in XE 3 or 4 or something. I can't remember what version it was, and it was still a little bit tricky. There was lots of things for me to get used to. FireMonkey was relatively new. And actually nowadays, I'm always impressed at how slick the solution is for RAD Studio and FireMonkey cross-platform stuff. Once you get the idea of using FireMonkey, creating cross-platform apps is very, very easy with Delphi, and it's not very easy with other competing technologies. I know because I'm a contract programmer. I work for other people from time to time. I work for myself, and sometimes I have to work with other teams that use different technologies other than Delphi. I tell them how stupid they are, but they don't always listen. And you actually realize that some of the other solutions out there, they have to have different projects for different targets. So if they're going to have an Android app then they have an Android project which has got all its own source code and everything in there. And if they've got an iOS app, then they've got an iOS project with everything in there. In Rad Studio, I don't know whether we made this clear, but you've got one project and you have targets in there and you have one set of source code. Now, there are some subtle differences between Android, iOS, and Windows, obviously, but you can use conditional compilation. So, if you know the compiler prompts where you can say if iOS and if Android. But actually, most of the platform components and all those kind of things make the changes for you behind the scenes. So your same piece of source code that you're writing for iOS mostly will work without any changes whatsoever for Android. The only difference is that you have a different target in there, and when you flip over, there's some different project properties for Android to what there is for iOS. But the real strength of Rad Studio, Delphi, and C++ Builder is one project, one set of source code, multiple targets. Now, it doesn't make a lot of sense to write a Windows desktop program and then try and shoehorn that into a mobile interface. But it does make sense to have something like Slack, for example, that has a Windows view that works for a desktop view and a mobile view that works for a mobile device. And with Delphi, almost all the code would stay the same as long as you use tpath and those kind of and constructions in the background. So I know you're going to expect me to say it's easy because I'm a Delphi MVP, but try it, download a trial copy or use the community edition and try it for yourself, and you'll see I'm not making this up, because I'm sure you would all very quickly challenge me and say, oh, Ian, you're just saying that. But I promise you it is not difficult to do cross-platform development. Most of the difficulties that you get with cross-platform development are things like we've just been talking about, web browsers doing things slightly differently. Some of the components work differently. There's no pop-up menu for iOS, so you can't have a component on the app that does a pop-up menu because it just doesn't exist. There is no such concept when you're pressing on your mobile device. You have gestures and things like that. And desktop apps don't tend to use gestures, so swiping like that on a desktop app, unless it's a touch app, doesn't make a lot of sense. But it's not really natural for people on a Windows desktop app or even a Mac app to use a mouse and swipe to close a window or something. Mostly you're clicking on buttons, whereas on Android and iOS, then you're swiping and three-finger, dragging down. Now, all of those are encapsulated in FireMonkey, and again, once you write your FireMonkey code, you can forget about the differences behind the scenes as long as you've got the views set up. So, what other questions have we got? Are there any special instructions for iOS to run on the Mac from the iOS store? No, I don't believe so. Someone's saying if you've got an iOS app and you can run it on the Mac, later versions of Mac OS allow you to run iOS apps on the Mac, and actually Windows 11 allows you to run Android apps on Windows. And I can tell you that there are no special instructions on Android because I do it. I've got some of my own apps that accidentally run on Windows, even though I don't want them to. I keep forgetting and they run. As far as I'm aware, I don't think there's any special
let me answer please about communication. I have a question about how to make communication between FMX application and the container, web browser container, and for instance JavaScript content inside the container. We don't have a lot of ways, but one of the most popular ways, like when we are calling something to our web browser container, we are providing some data via the query string. Query string is like a part of URL. You can just put everything, and after that, we also can have callback methods for getting some information back to our FMX application. According to the packages inside Get It Package Manager, as I remember, we have 3 packages. which will provide for you like a wrapper for all this functionality, and it will be much easier. You want to develop everything from scratch. It's called something like bridge, something like just use bridge keyword, and I guess you will find it.
Yeah. Someone's asking what version of Mac OS is required. I always forget the names of the Mac OSs. let me just look them up at the moment. Because all out. Right. So definitely Monterey is one that will work because that's what I've got. And whatever there was the previous one, which I forget now. Let's pull it up. I don't use a Mac day in day out. I only use it for So Mac OS Ventura, Mac OS Monterey, and Big Sur, Catalina, and Mojave. Now, okay, let's just talk for a second about the version of Mac OS. The trouble you have is that if you want to target iOS devices, there's something very weird that happens with iOS devices that doesn't happen with Android. And that is, within the release of the latest version of iOS, very, very quickly, and I mean within a week to 2 weeks, all of your customers will update to the latest version of iOS. Those that can. I mean, if they've got older iPhones, you know, like iPhone 6 or something like that, then not, because perhaps the iOS will not support it. But all the devices that can, and they do try to go back a number of years, will upgrade to the latest version of iOS. It just happens, whether you like it or not. And it's a weird phenomenon. Now, with Android, that doesn't happen. You will quickly find that your Android customers will have a wide range of different versions of Android, from Lollipop and all the rest of the other random names that Google and the like come out with, you know, Mr. Ben and Timmy Time and all the other crazy things. But most of your iOS customers will be on the latest version. If you have that happen and you are targeting iOS 15, for example, and this just happened to Serge and I when we were going to record this video. We planned to record this video a month ago, maybe a bit longer. And what happened was, on the day before I was going to record it, I thought, oh, I better make sure my Mac is up to date. And Serge is laughing, but what happened was my Mac updated to the latest version of Mac OS. So I didn't ask it to; it just did. I'd obviously got it switched on, and he went, "Oh, I'm sure you want the latest version." So I updated, which was fine. Except my phone also did that as well. And now all of a sudden, the problem I had was my Xcode would not talk to the version of iOS on my phone. What I had to do, actually, it was the other way around. My phone updated, and then I went to go and use my Mac OS and connect to the phone, and he wouldn't do it, because what happens is, Apple make it so that the latest version of iOS, you have to have the latest version of Xcode. But the little catch there is that if you upgrade your Xcode, it has to work on the latest version of macOS. And so I was stuck in this loop of like, I had this upgraded, then I went to upgrade my Xcode, and then I had to upgrade the macOS. And once I upgraded the macOS, then there's some other problems as well. So
and you cannot downgrade your iPhone. That's all. That's a way to only with one way road.
Yeah, and Serge and I were like, well, there's nothing we can do. We're just gonna have to wait now, because my Mac was quite slow and it took a while to download. So the answer to the question is, what version of Mac OS is required? If you are going to genuinely support the latest majority of your iOS customers, then you will probably need the latest version of Xcode for the SDK. And I'll talk about that in a minute, because that's not always true, but you will probably need the latest version. If you need the latest version of Xcode, Apple have made it so that the latest version of Xcode will only work on the latest version of Mac OS. So the answer is, it depends on what you're trying to support. If you're trying to support iOS 15 or the latest absolute build of that, then you've got to use the latest Xcode, because it will not allow you to download a newer version of the iOS API, or iOS SDK, onto an older version of Xcode. I tried it and it specifically said no. So you have to do it. However, if you have the latest version of macOS and the latest version of Xcode, you can download older SDKs for earlier versions of Xcode, of iOS. So what you could do is download the SDK for iOS 14, and that means you can target those older iPhones that are not able to upgrade to the latest version of iOS. So you can go older, but if you're going to have the most up-to-date iOS, then you must use the latest version of macOS and the latest version of Xcode. Now, sometimes they allow, you'll get a newer version of macOS and a slightly older version of Xcode will work, but the last couple of versions that's not happened. So that may be that Apple are preventing that. Apple have an absolute monopoly on this. If you want to develop iOS and macOS apps, you have no option but to follow Apple's rules. You're stuck with it, whether you like it, whether you disagree with it, whether you think it's competitive or not anti-competitive. It doesn't really make any difference. They're the only game in town. It's their app store. They call the shots. That's it. The other
also, I would like to add a lot of question about if we, for instance, get some minor macOS update. It's not necessary. There is no such like which version IDE supports right now. When we have new version of macOS or iOS, for instance, using Delphi, inside Delphi, using SDK manager, we can download from Xcode up-to-date version. It does not mean that all methods will be removed. No. Apple usually will add something new which Delphi does not support right now, some minor features, but everything will work. Apple usually, if they will remove some methods or some classes, it will be marked as deprecated and they will work a couple of years anyway. That's not the reason that if we got new macOS or iOS version, we have to use new version of Delphi IDE. No, that's not necessary. We just inside Delphi just upload and refresh SDK versions from Xcode.
Yeah, and someone asked as well with regard to SDKs, what about using libraries that are not supported? And actually, a good answer to that is to do with TMS's components. TMS have got some native, I think they call it ICL or something like that, and they actually have some libraries that are not part of the standard SDK that you need to add to your platform. So on the screenshot, if you go to the blog, you'll see the screenshot where I had the SDKs in there. You can actually click on add, and you can add additional SDKs or APIs that are not supported by default. It's a fairly sort of advanced process if you are doing your own sort of links, but it's perfectly possible to do it. I have to do it every time I'm doing an upgrade because I have to use a special camera component, which is not the standard Delphi one, because of the security that I need to include in one of my iOS enterprise apps, and I have to add these SDKs in there. One of them, weirdly enough, is the social API. I don't know why that's not supported out of the box, but hey, there you go. And you find that each version of Delphi, when you add it, suddenly there's less of them you have to add. So it's good. One question that I want to cover is about the App Store process. Someone was asking, and I can't find them in all the questions, got too many. Someone said, okay, so what happens when you create your app? Okay, well, this, how long does it take you to create that? Well, you could write an iOS app in a day. It's not difficult because actually mobile devices, for all the amount that we use them, they're actually relatively simple things. There isn't a lot going on. But getting from the point where you have hit compile, you've tested it on your phone and it works, to actually getting on sale in the App Store is a long process. You have to submit it through an App Store submission process, which go to the Apple pages, they explain it all with diagrams and all the rest of it. That will take you some time for it to happen. Now, Dave Nottage, who is a very good developer and MVP, runs the Delphi Worlds forum, which I put a link on and everybody seemed to join. He, for example, has an app that's already out there and has just submitted some updates and has been waiting 2.5 weeks for the updates to be accepted. And the trouble you have with Apple is there are people you can contact to say, excuse me, this process is stalled, but they'll get to you eventually. And again, they're a big company and there's not much you can do about it. But you can expect that the first time that you submit your app to the App Store, it will probably get rejected. And it's over the weirdest things. It is, oh, you included an advertising link for something. Oh, as Serge, I think you mentioned, oh, it has an Android login, but not an Apple login or something like that.
Yes, because they scan your binary, they check in features and functions which you have, even not start just during upload. The same thing like for Android we have. And of course, let's say it's not easy, especially if we are working with different personal data. If you have some Facebook SDK integrations, it can be a big headache.
Yeah, and the other problem as well is, you know, it's not always clear what their rules are, but they do have a lot of rules, and once your app is out there, if you suddenly do something in your app that they discover they don't like, you run the risk of them withdrawing your app like that, and it's a bit scary, because if you make your business model based on this app and then Apple withdraw it, it's very, very difficult to challenge a decision and get back in again. So just be cautious. I personally do not base my income on iOS apps. They are additional to what I do normally, not main core business that I do. We're getting towards the end of our planned time. The other thing was about the certificates as well. Like I say, again, if they expire or you do something wrong, then your apps can just stop working, and that happens with the enterprise apps as well. There are terms and conditions on the website that your enterprise customer needs to accept, and you know what, if you don't accept those terms and conditions, which they just randomly put up every so often, your apps will stop working. Great. And you don't know as a developer, but you just find out because you go to the enterprise company and say, excuse me, but why can't I sign my apps? And they go, oh, there's a email we forgot to look at and we've got to do it. So, having an iOS app, having a Mac OS app can make you plenty of money, make you famous, could also be a useful addition to your core business if you're writing desktop apps or web apps or something like that. But you are playing by a very fierce set of rules and infrastructure from Apple, which is extremely difficult and full of rules that can really be tricky to navigate correctly, and it takes even the best developers a lot of time to get their head around. Writing the app in Delphi is easy. It's all the other bits that are tricky. I think so anyway. So okay, Serge, any kind of final words before we go?
No, I would like to add from my side that if somebody is like a newbie for iOS development, anyway, we have to pass a long way for understanding how to create, deploy, and support iOS application, because a totally different world, if even compare with Windows and even with Android. They have their own process for all this certification, provisioning, all this testing, all the support devices. That's a separate, let's say, layer, and this is not a development. This is the time which we have to spend, each developer have to spend for understanding. It's not about Delphi, it's just understanding how this Apple's world just exists in their rules. There is no other ways. Same thing, like we have a rule, we have to use Apple development account and device. That's a rule. That's they are not invented by us.
Yeah, and as I said before, they have all the power. They're one of the richest companies in the world, if not the richest company in the world, and most of us are not. And therefore, attempting to try and sue Apple to
to bring your business back from the doldrums after they decided that something was wrong is not going to work. And it's safer to follow their rules right from the outset and try and get it right. There are plenty of groups out there. I definitely recommend Slack for the Delphi developers. There are several really good groups out there. Like I say, Dave Nottage's group is particularly good. And people like Serge, who is a technology partner. So go to Serge's website if you're looking to have apps done. A little plug for you there, Serge. I don't do that. I'm far too busy to go and develop applications for other people unless they wheel up a massive, great big wheelbarrow of gold bars and say please, and then I might do it. But apart from that, I'm too busy.
Sure, and I have all this real commercial experience for iOS. It's not just only some examples or books. Because that's the first step. But I really have, and I know all the headache for all iOS development. And if we have a case when we have some feature which is not available for Delphi, and we have a possibility to write this Roper bridge, like bridge between Delphi code, Object Pascal code, and iOS SDKs. It's all possible. I can add from myself. Everything is possible.
Yeah, definitely, and that's the thing. I keep saying this about Delphi is the key thing about Delphi is it's very easy to use. I don't understand why more people don't use Delphi for everything, because it's just dead easy. I mean, I'm lazy. I try not to work too hard, and I can write programs in it, so I'm sure other people can. And the stability of the apps, and the fact you can just, sending it out to all these platforms without an awful lot of effort. Setting up is the tricky part. Once you've set it up, it's writing an application is not difficult. Trust me. Okay, well, I think we'll call it a day because we are right at the end of our hour-and-a-half slot that we said we'd give out. I'm not sure if Jim's there. He did say he's gone away, so I'll probably do the wrap-up. Thanks to Serge Pilko from Softcom. There are links to him on the blog if you want to hear more from him. He's a very good guy, good friend of mine, and friend of a lot of the MVPs. We've been on a few videos now. And from me as well, Embarcadero. You can see me on the blog and various other places, and on Twitter. If you use Twitter, follow me at Punctuation, and we'll include a link to Serge as well if you want. Yes. Lots of people chasing you across social media. Who needs that?
Okay, I'm also very glad to be here, especially with Ian, because you see, guys, I can be silent all the time, and I won't be able to inject a couple of my words in just this constant Ian speech.
I've improved. I've learned to give people some time to talk. Yeah, people think I breathe out my ears because I keep talking. Anyway, thanks a lot, Serge. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you all next time. Go to the blog. The link is there. And we'll speak to you soon. Thanks.